I have a long-running theory that conservatives are unable to understand subtext in works of art. And today we're going to be talking about movies, but this can apply to pretty much anything. Now, a lot of you guys liked my video about Ben Shapiro loving Blade Runner, and I talked about how conservatives didn't understand their favourite films. These films they hold up as the best movies ever, often unruined by the woke politics of the 2010s and the 2020s, without realising most of these films were very political. Also, most of these films were quite left-wing, including films like Blade Runner, Aliens, Star Wars, all made by left-wing guys who talked about the left-wing messages in these films. So today what I thought would be fun is to do a sequel edition. So we're going to be looking at the announcement of sequels and how anti-SJWs and conservatives react based on their understanding of the first movie. And surprising no one, they often don't understand the first movie, including the very political, the very not subtle at all District 9 set in South Africa. And we're going to talk about all the messages that are so obvious that are seemingly missed. And then I also actually want to revisit the Ben Shapiro Blade Runner thing, because I actually have a lot of people who have criticised me from conservatives saying you're an idiot for thinking any of the Blade Runner films have anything to do with like climate change and I guess like human consumption of the planet and of course capitalism. And I just want to delve a bit deeper into that stuff and like clarify some points and just prove to people that yes, the subtext of both Blade Runner movies has an environmentalist message. But before we get any further, I want to plug my social media and Patreon for about a minute. Skip if you're not interested. There are timestamps, or at least should be, in the description. Before we get any further, a lot of my work on this channel is demonetized because when you're covering more serious, sometimes edgier topics, YouTube doesn't like this. So if you've ever enjoyed my work, please consider becoming a patron. And you don't have to pledge a crazy amount. I want to build up my Patreon based on as many people as possible pledging little amounts like $1 or $2. So if you feel like I have ever brought anything that's worthwhile into your life and my content, please really consider becoming a patron to help me continue to do this regardless of if YouTube monetize or not most of my videos in a given month. Also, if you want to join our communities, come check out our Discord and my subreddit. Those links in the description. And if you want to follow me personally, please check out the Kavernacle at Twitter, at Instagram, and also my personal Reddit where you can keep up to date with all my content and what I'm doing. I've got some good videos planned this week, so I'm hopefully going to make some more progress on getting the next chocolate orange. 45k is the next one and 50k is another one. Want both of them before the end of the year, so help me get that goal. I also live stream on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and that is archived on the Kavernacle Extra, my second channel. So if you've missed them or you just want to check out previous live streams, if the video right here isn't enough for you, go check out my second channel. So I want to talk about the most hilarious one first, and that is the sequel to District 9, District 10. And what the director, Neil Blomkamp, said this movie would be about. And let's see how anti-SJWs and conservatives reacted to this stuff before talking about like the very explicit politics of the original that came out in 2009. So people were replying to an IGN tweet of a story they ran, and it said, District 10 will be based on a topic in American history. So the article says, it seems that while South African history was the impetus to make District 9, District 10 will be looking to events in the United States. Blomkamp saying, there was a topic in American history that the second I realised that fit into the world of District 9, it felt like an awesome way to do a sequel. So yeah, it continues to be developed and it's getting a lot closer. Literally didn't really say that much apart from it would pivot from being about South African politics to being about American politics. Now, funnily enough, a lot of the anti-SJW grifter channels didn't actually make videos on this. I think it's because they got clowned on Twitter so bad for even suggesting District 9 was going woke as opposed to already being woke. So Yellow Fash tweeted, and this one got deleted pretty quick, looks like District 10 is going to be woke trash. Such a shame. The first one was so good. So not only is this guy annoyed that the sequel will be woke trash, he loves the first one. Loves the first one. The first one about South African apartheid. He loved that film. And the new one is going to be woke trash, not the first one at all. Like, there's one thing not understanding subtext. There's another completely missing the whole point of the movie. So Josiah Rises, who's affiliated with Geeks and Gamers, also says, this is a pretty good indicator that District 10 will be woke. As opposed to what? What was District 9? And then loads of other people in the comments saying, why do people think entertainment needs modern problems in it? It's supposed to be an escape. Not realising basically every, piece of art is political in some way. I'd rather they never made a sequel at this point. Well, we know the outcome if that's the case. Go woke, go broke. Damn, woke liberals will destroy the franchises and everything else we love. Looks like District 10 is going to be woke. What happened to just making a movie about aliens? Or trying to follow up on the dude's story who got turned into an alien? God damn. Now, I like this tweet specifically because it really plays into my point that conservatives and anti-SJWs just don't understand the point of movies. They literally think of movies as in the A to B plot, right? So they think of District 9 about this guy like slowly becoming the alien, and that's the plot. That's the only plot. There is no relevance to any wider messaging, world building, political messaging, maybe stuff you can draw parallels with in South African history. It's just literally A, B, tunnel vision. That's all you see. Literally, if they don't say it's about something very, very, very explicitly, and if the film literally isn't set in the historical time period that the events it's referencing are set in, these guys don't understand that. And this is my absolutely favourite one. And it's got Senator Armstrong from Metal Gear with the laser eyes. I've waited 12 years for a sequel and they're gonna ruin it. If you are so desperate for a sequel to District 9 that you've been pining for one for 12 years, maybe you could at least understand what it's about. Instead of getting really mad that the director said it might be about some part of American history. Again, like, this stuff is just so bizarre that these guys claim to love this movie and don't know anything about it. So not all of you would have seen this movie. So I just want to talk about the politics like explicitly and what the director said about them. Just to make it clear that there's pretty much like no way you can like misconstrue what is being shown on screen. So from 2009 by David Smith at The Guardian, District 9, South Africa and apartheid come to the movies. District 9 wears its politics most lightly, making no mention of apartheid or its legacy in today's impoverished black townships, but the allegorical overtones are inescapable in the plot about aliens who, their spaceship stranded above Johannesburg, have to endure a daily routine of unemployment, gangsterism and xenophobia in a squalid shantytown. Prawns, as they are known in derogatory slang because of their vaguely crustacean appearance, spend their hopeless days brawling, and District 9's director, Neil Blomkamp, lives in Canada but was born and grew up in Johannesburg. In my opinion, the film doesn't exist without Joburg, he told journalists last month. It's not like I had a story and then I was trying to pick a city. It's totally the other way around. I actually think Johannesburg represents the future. What I think the world is going to become looks like Johannesburg. So an interview with MTV, director talks District 9 and District 10. So the interviewer asks him, talk about how the unique idea behind District 9 took shape. Blomkamp saying, it's a long story. I guess the genesis of the film comes from the short film I did in 2005, Alive in Joburg. At the time, I was directing commercials, but in between commercials, I did these crazy short films to just mess around with ideas. And I had an idea to just put Western sci-fi I'd grown up with into a South African setting. That's what Alive in Joburg was. When it came time to turn that into a feature film, the first thing we had to do was flesh out the world of District 9, and from there you could decide what your point of view was. You could decide what point of view you wanted to tell the story from. The interviewer saying, is it too simplistic to look at the aliens segregated into District 9 as a metaphor for black Africans under apartheid? Director saying, it's not too simplistic, but I think there are other elements. Another element that should be noted with the new black government since 1999 is the large number of immigrants in South Africa that have become a problem. They're mostly Zimbabweans because Zimbabwe was collapsing and they crossed the border into South Africa. So if you forget about apartheid for a second, if you forget about white oppression, there's a whole other social dynamic going on with impoverished Zimbabweans who have come to South Africa for a richer life by comparative standards. But they've ended up in a lot of the impoverished townships a lot of black South Africans live in. So now black South Africans view the Zimbabweans with animosity because they'll work for less money. The short film has some of that with these black South Africans wanting the aliens out of their townships. That's a crazy thing because there aren't many places in the world where this would happen. So not only clearly about apartheid, also about some very contemporary issues in South African politics with refugees and how they fit in to this society. There's also an angle of the militarization and privatization of the police. So Vincent Green wrote an article. The treatment and tactics of oppression run deep within District 9's story. The enforcers are M and U. This is where Blomkamp focuses on the militarization and privatization of the police, which is something he would keenly concentrate on in Chappie, but it's also rife within District 9. The use of tanks and armoured vehicles has become more and more prevalent from civil police forces. It also shows us that when a private police force is deployed, there's an immediate disconnect between them and the ones they are policing. I don't think a lot of police have that problem anyway, but again, this film has made a lot of so-called woke political points. So again, that is probably the most ridiculous example, because I don't understand really how you can love District 9 but not understand, at least on a very surface level, the politics of what is going on there. Even if you didn't realise it was about South African politics, there's a very clear message about like xenophobia at the very least. But now let's move on to The Matrix. This is another ridiculous one. The Matrix 4, of course, has recently got its first trailers, and I'm pretty hyped for it. Like, I thought the trailers are pretty cool. Maybe because I watched it on IMAX screen before I saw James Bond. But there's also a lot of people complaining about The Matrix going woke. Now, before we get into some like better analysis of The Matrix, like the politics of The Matrix, especially the first one, I think are very apparent. I don't think they're saying like anything revolutionary really though, because of course you have like this aesthetic of late 1990s movies of like the office space and like how sterile it is, and like this era of, you know, the real massive expansion of globalization with America leading this charge after the Cold War. And then, of course, you have like what Morpheus says about like the system in general, and, you know, realizing it's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. And then just generally a lot of the things about, you know, the humans being used as batteries by the machine, and just this general machine that is the Matrix, where everyone is sedated and people need to wake up to overthrow this system, you know. And even one of the creators said it was because they were frustrated at capitalism. Now, I don't think it's like, you know, the most damning critique of capitalism, but it's obviously there. And obviously now we also know, because the directors are transgender, that this film was largely inspired by their own struggles with their gender identity, right? So on multiple levels, The Matrix is woke, and it's only become more woke as more meaning has been, you know, got out of that trilogy. But, you know, there's various reactions to it. So Keanu Reeves talking about how great the script was, and someone saying, let's hope Matrix 4 is not a bunch of woke BS. I'm trusting Keanu on this one. Fingers crossed it's worth the hype. Matrix 4 is just woke rebooting of the franchise for the new generation of 20-somethings who can't breathe without demonizing everything that came before them as cringe. Lol at that new Diet Coke Morpheus. I can tell you right now that Matrix 4 is going ultra woke, loaded with establishment propaganda. We have reached a point in history and our Matrix that the originality of cyberpunk dystopian alarmist works of fiction have been totally compromised. Someone else quoting Matrix and then complaining about being woke, they actually quote the Morpheus thing that I was referencing. So the Matrix is a system, Neo. The system is our enemy, but when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, and carpenters. The very minds of the people we're trying to save. But until we do, these people are still part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand that most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. And then underneath that, the guy says, Matrix 4 will be trash, by the way. It's going to be a woke fest of misdirection. There is a reason it's being made now 20 years later, to confuse and to subdue. It will probably change everything you were led to believe in the first. But again, I just find this so bizarre, because the same people who are behind the original three are also making the new one. And the politics were always pretty apparent. Again, The Matrix was woke by these guys' definition. It's very likely that 4 will also be woke. It's hardly going to be like neoconservative propaganda, is it? This one is just really weird. Now that the Wachowskis are woke, I fear that Matrix 4 is going to suck. I mean, are they woke because they're transgender? Like, they still had like woke politics before this. Matrix 4 will be a woke fest. Why do I get this feeling that Matrix 4 will be a total and utter farcical fest of SJW derangement and woke exhibitionism gone mad? It potentially has the ability to be super cringe. Prediction: Matrix 4 will be unwatchable woke dogma. Keep violently waking up from the nightmares that woke culture is going to ruin Matrix 4. Again, so ridiculous. Has like this anti-SJW culture war just broken so many people's brains? You don't have to like the politics of every film you watch. I've watched like plenty of Mel Gibson films I thought were decent. I don't like the politics of them. There are plenty of films I've watched in my life, but I've really said I hate the politics of them. Like The Deer Hunter, I can appreciate as like a film. it's also like has insanely problematic depictions of like Vietnamese people and stuff. And its view on the Vietnam War is clearly very against my politics and everything, but you can appreciate the film for what it is. But these guys can't realise that, yeah, maybe The Matrix was about like anti-capitalism, anti-corporatism, waking up to how the system exploits us all, and also we've later learned it's about, you know, coming out as transgender. It was always woke, just accept it for what it was, and you can also like the cool jackets and the shootouts in it. Broadly speaking, for your average person, if you don't like the politics or something, you can still appreciate art. The only exception I will make is when anti-SJWs, who politicise everything, and everything for them is part of their culture war, when they like something that has politics that are basically against their politics, that's the one exception I'll make. Be like, you probably shouldn't like that because it's literally against everything you stand for as like a content creator. Now, by and large, Screen Rant is trash, like straight up trash. But, you know, I take every article by its own merit. So Chris Sean Baker actually wrote a good article. I'm surprised they even let him write this. The Matrix movie have a hidden anti-capitalist message. I wouldn't say it's hidden, but interesting nonetheless, this article. It's like decent, just outlining the really, really obvious points. So, in the first film, in one of the most infamous scenes of all time, Neo wakes up in a floating tank suspended in the air, surrounded by thousands of similar pods. Viewers soon discover that this is all of humanity and that is their fate. Both humans and the machines build their empires on the backs of exploitation. Humanity creates an entire sentient species to simply use them for labour, and when the machines rise up in defence of themselves, humanity tries to get rid of them, leading to a massive war. In the future, hundreds of years after the end of the war, the machines turn into the exploitation of humans for their extended survival. A major criticism of the capitalist economic system is that it depends on the exploitation of the working class by those higher up, and the Matrix films build their entire conflict on this critique. Like the simulation in the Matrix, capitalism functions as a grand illusion. A lot of capitalism's critics state that a capitalist society tricks the working class into believing that the system is working in their favour, despite them being actively exploited. In turn, these people will uphold the tenets of the system in the hopes that they will one day achieve the same status as the people on top. It creates an illusion that the system will indeed work one day, and as long as it's upheld and continues to run unchallenged. This is paralleled in the first film in the franchise, and directly stated by Morpheus during his monologue. While exploring the Matrix of Neo and exposing him to the intricacies of the simulation, Morpheus points out that people who have not yet been awakened in the real world have no idea what's actually going on behind the scenes. This is a reference to the kinds of labour that make up the working class. While the 1% at the top are made up of billionaires, celebrities and CEOs, the ones turning the cogs of the system are the ones who are actually engaged in the labour. These are the people that Neo and Morpheus have to save, but at the same time those people are still stuck inside the simulation, still actively contributing to its existence. Morpheus ends his speech by telling Neo, you have to understand most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so injured and hopelessly dependent on the system they will fight to protect it. Just like those stuck in the simulation, the Matrix seems to be saying that until exposed to a better system, those stuck in the wheels of capitalism will fight to defend it. So maybe stating the obvious there, but I liked the summation just to show to you guys that it's not a weird interpretation. And the whole thing about waking up, how much more woke can you get than literally waking up to the exploitation of a capitalist system, which is represented by the Matrix? So again, another ridiculous one. Now, one that is less obvious, I will say, is Blade Runner. Blade Runner, of course, the original came out in 1982, and the second one came out in 2049. In my last video, I talked about how both of these films show capitalism run amok and the inevitable consequences of capitalism and how it will destroy the planet, and how, especially the second film, is about climate change. Now, like I said, I've had some criticism from conservatives saying I'm literally crazy for thinking this. But let's first get into like why I think this is quite funny. So Ben Shapiro says, by the way, Blade Runner 2049 should be up for Best Picture. And then another one, okay, as a lighter break from another awful news cycle, name your 5 favourite movies. And in his second list, it's Blade Runner 2049. Now, why this is so funny, especially when we're talking about climate change, is of course that infamous Ben Shapiro line while talking about climate change, saying that if the sea levels rise and your house is being threatened with destruction by the sea, do you not just think people will sell their very valuable houses that are on the brink of being destroyed and then just move somewhere else?
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater, right? Which, let's say all of that happens. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Now, to Ben Shapiro's, sort of credit, he actually does acknowledge that climate change is a thing now, Although in his zealous support for like capitalism and fighting against like regulations to help the environment, it's pretty clear he doesn't really care about it. But yes, both Blade Runner films kind of deal with this like environmentalism thing, and so does the book. So in the first film, for example, there aren't any real animals left, pretty much. And that's kind of talked about in the book with like the owls being the first to go extinct. But yeah, like there's pretty much nothing natural left. But at least in the first film, you might want to kind of like visit for like a day because the aesthetic is, you know, very pleasing to look at. Like this neon and this rain and just like this massive urban sprawl, which just like filled, you know, even the Tyrell Corporation, these massive pyramids. And with, you know, the amazing soundtrack and everything, it's just kind of like somewhere you want to go. But of course, it's clear about, you know, how capitalism has, you know, ravaged this society and how it's changed society. But the second film, I think, is very, very apparent. So first of all, LA has an absolutely massive seawall, and the finale of the film is actually set on this seawall, so you can't miss it. It's there. Los Angeles with a giant seawall. First of all, like, how are you not meant to take that as something about like rising sea levels? Rising sea levels where you need a massive concrete wall around LA to protect it from, you know, erosion and everything, and all these buildings, property falling into the ocean. Not only that, LA is snowing and raining all the time. This was inspired by Denis Villeneuve growing up, I think, in Toronto, where the weather was a bit more like this regularly, but this is in LA. And of course, San Diego's estate has been turned into a massive dump. There's not only not any animals anymore in this world, there is basically no natural materials because Ryan Gosling's character has a wooden horse and he takes it to like the shopkeeper to get it analysed about where it's from, basically. And he basically says this is worth so much, it's real wood. And there's like a dead tree in the plot as well. And one of the replicants says, I've never seen a tree before. And not even realising it's a dead tree. So that is the subtext of this world. It's not literally the plot. Like, Ryan Gosling's character isn't like, I have to reverse climate change, or we've got to stop climate change. Of course, that's not the plot. It's the subtext, it's the world building, and it's not very subtle in many ways. Like, of course, they don't comment on this stuff, but visually, as film is a visual medium, you can see how this world is being destroyed by climate change and how there is a little environmentalist theme to this movie. Now, the BBC, probably the only thing they've done right in the last like 6 years, did a really, really good, expansive, like massive project on the first Blade Runner, and they had like various people write articles and do little like, I guess, shows about the first film during the actual month the film was set in, November 2019. So there's one article by David Barnett I wanted to read for you quick, just as someone who sums it up nicely about what both films represent. So it's saying, are we living in a Blade Runner world? So it goes on to say, as for the devastating effects of pollution and climate change evident in Blade Runner as well as its 2017 sequel, Blade Runner 2049, the environmental collapse the film so vividly depicts is not too far off from where we are today, as science fiction writer and software developer Matthew Kressel, pointing to the infamous 2013 picture of the Beijing smog that looks like a cut frame from the film. And we're currently undergoing the greatest mass extinction since the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago. In addition, the film's depictions of haves and have-nots, those who are able to live comfortable lives while the rest live in squalor, is remarkably parallel to the immense disparity in wealth between the world's richest and poorest today. In that sense, the film is quite accurate. It goes on to say, it's not necessarily predictive science fiction can also prove to have a symbiotic relationship with the present. Cowell says, so many people in STEM fields cite science fiction films or books as their inspiration for an invention. Did Star Trek invent the flip phone or cause it to come into being? Did 1984 predict the Big Brother state or prevent it from being so pervasive? And it can also provide warning for us to mend our ways. Nobody surely would want to live in November 29 depicted by Blade Runner, would they? Don't be too sure, says Kressel. In a way, Blade Runner can be thought of as the ultimate cautionary tale. Has there ever been a vision so totally bleak, one that shows how environmental degradation, dehumanization, and personal estrangement are so harmful to the future of the world? And yet, if anything, Blade Runner just shows the failure of the premise that cautionary tales actually work. Instead, we have fetishized Blade Runner's dystopian vision. Look at most art depicting the future across literature, film, visual art, and almost all of them you will find echoes of Blade Runner's bleak dystopia. Blade Runner made dystopias cool, and so here we are, careening towards environmental collapse, one burned hectare of rainforest at a time. If anything, I think we should be looking at why we failed to heed its warning. So I'm not the only one thinking there is an environmentalist message to Blade Runner. Again, that is the subtext of the book, of the first film, and of the second film. And granted, it's more subtext than District 9, but it still plays into my overall point that conservatives do not understand anything but a tunnel vision version of a film where it's all about the plot. They might as well just watch the film with a blindfold on and just listen to the dialogue and think about the A to B plot because they don't care about anything else. And why it's particularly funny, like Anti-SJWs talking about District 9 going woke despite the fact loving the original or Blade Runner being their favourite movie, is for someone like Ben Shapiro, who is considered by many a titan of conservative intellect, these films literally hold a mirror up to him and say, this is what your politics cause. This is what your politics are doing to the world, and this is what we're going to become because of people like you in positions of power, corporations and governments who are just going forward with disaster capitalism that will result in a world that resembles the dystopic themes of the Blade Runner films. So that is it. I just thought it would be a bit funny. Also, just hopefully through my analysis of this stuff, I've just clearly showed you that at the very least, these films are woke. They're political. They're coming from like an anti-establishment, left-wing bias normally. And in my mind, they are better films for it because they actually have something to say, which I largely agree with. But anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you want to follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter and on Instagram, come join our communities on Discord and my subreddit. If you want to support my work, check out my Patreon. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.